As some of you may know, Donald Trump came out the other day after his meeting with Bibi Netanyahu, and he literally said, um, we're going to relocate the Palestinians. Hopefully, some of these Arab nations will take them in, and we're going to rebuild Gaza. We're going to own it. Shortly after that, his press secretary Carolyn Levitt had to kind of say that they're not expecting to have boots on the ground, and it wouldn't necessarily be paid for by America. And so this was after he met with Bibi Netanyahu a few days ago. Um, Shortly after, he met with the King of Jordan. And so this kind of started a whole entire shitstorm. Um, I'm not really sure how this is going to play out. Um, I don't, I really don't know if it doesn't work out, it's going to end up pretty badly. And then if it does work out, we could actually have possibly, potentially, somewhat peace in the Middle East, but that in itself is highly unlikely. So let's just kind of review what Trump said the other day, which is pretty huge. And we're going to talk about Hamas's response, Saudi Arabia's response, some of the MAGA crowd, the America First response to it. Um, I am more on the side of Dave Smith, great political commentator. I advise everybody to kind of look at some of the things that he says on YouTube. He's also, I like him somewhat as a comedian. And we're also going to review what Sean Strickland said from the UFC. But this is kind of what Donald Trump said. Um, we're going to kind of go over everything.
No, I would say Saturday at 12, we want them all back. I'm speaking for myself. Israel can override it. But from myself, Saturday at 12 o'clock, and if they're not here, all hell is going to break out.
CBS News correspondent Natalie Brand is following this for us from the White House this morning. Natalie, that ultimatum came when the president was signing executive orders. But give us a bit of context in how this came up and what else was said.
Yeah, he was signing those orders and then taking questions from reporters. And one journalist asked him about the new reports that Hamas was going to be postponing the release of the next round of hostages. That's when the president started talking about the conditions of the hostages that have been released so far, saying, they've been in poor health, emaciated. And then he went on.
So, what people fail to realize is um, most of the female soldiers that are under Hamas, that are being held, they are pretty healthy. Obviously, you can get online and look at a lot of the pictures. More of the male soldiers and male hostages, obviously, they do look pretty frail. A lot has to do with two things. One being, a lot of the aid has been stopped. Even now, I mean, the aid is kind of somewhat coming in, but it's kind of being dripped in a sense. So obviously, Hamas, realized that it's better to feed a female hostage over a male hostage. And then two being, when you're talking about soldiers, not saying that I agree with this, but it's just kind of like logical. A male can overpower you, so do you really want him, at his full fighting force? So that's kind of, another thought to that. Um, but a lot of what people don't understand is the prisoners that Israel's withholding are truly innocent people. Um, they're just citizens, innocent bystanders, and there's obviously been truly documented records of sexual abuse by the IDF on Palestinians. So we can't also negate that.
To deliver this ultimatum, saying that he wants all hostages released by noon on Saturday, or else, he said, all hell will break out. Now, when pressed by reporters, when asked what that would mean, he said, they'll find out, you'll find out. Didn't really give a lot of details, but did repeat a couple different times this deadline of Saturday at noon. Although, Errol, it's important to note that he also said Israel could override it, that ultimately this is their decision. And this comes as both sides, including White House mediators, are trying to keep this ceasefire agreement together. Hamas had accused Israel of violating it by not letting some Palestinians return to the north, also saying that they were coming under attack of gunfire. Well, Israel has said that if the release of additional hostages is postponed, that would be a clear violation.
So what's also going on during the ceasefire? Israel is still attacking the Palestinians. So, and there are people on the more religious ideologue um, in Bibi Netanyahu's cabinet that don't want to see a ceasefire. They do want to pretty much take not only just all of Gaza, they want to take all of the West Bank, some of Lebanon, and some of Syria because they have this idea which is called the Greater Israel. So we're going to pull up the map of what they think is really going on. Um, so this is Greater Israel, which is what they really want. They want part of Cairo, which is where the pyramids are, the Nile, obviously, the Suez Canal. A lot of trade exports kind of come out of this. Um, Obviously, it's going to be nearly impossible for them to get to kind of. Let me actually blow this up if I can. If I can get a bigger. There we go. Okay. So, as I was saying, they want Cairo, which is where the pyramids are, and the part of the Nile River. Um, this southern part that kind of connects the Red Sea. And the reason why they want that is because it's part of the Sinai Peninsula and the Suez Canal. So it's equivalent to the Panama Canal, where a lot of trade kind of comes from Africa, India, through here into the Mediterranean Sea and then into the Atlantic Ocean. Obviously, they want to take all of Lebanon. Syria has already fallen, but they do want to take Syria. Iraq has already fallen, so they want to take all of Iraq. They do want to take Jordan. And so here's going to be the big problem is they want to take Saudi Arabia or a big chunk of Saudi Arabia, which is nearly impossible. Saudi Arabia is obviously a huge powerhouse. So this is what their uh, ultimate goal is. So go map of Israel. And so this is, let me see if I can find it. That is, all right. So we're not going to go too deep into the Bible, but obviously, You can do your own extensive research. Let me see where that map was at. Here it is. So they consider this the Philistines, or like this was the Philistine army, but this is what was so-called, well, if you believe in the Bible, this is what was promised to Abraham, Moses, and Joshua. So, and obviously, even after the life and death of Joshua, they had to take more land. The Israel became a northern kingdom and a southern kingdom. So here is what they consider as Judah, and then this is what they consider as Israel. So this is part of where the history of the Greater Israel Project kind of comes from. They believe that this land belongs to them. We're not going to get too much into that right now, but my personal opinion, it doesn't. They're not even from there. But a lot of the reason why this war is continue going on is Netanyahu has literally had an ongoing corruption trial, and so what's kind of staying that trial and putting a pause on that trial is the fact that he has this ongoing war going on with Lebanon, um, Syria, and obviously Gaza. And their two biggest issues, because they're humongous powerhouses, is Iran, who has Russian support, and Saudi Arabia, which is now part of BRICS. Well, I'm not going to say they're officially part of BRICS, but they're doing dealings with BRICS, and they're willing to accept other currency other than the United States petrodollar.
אוקיי, תודה. מוטי? יאללה. חבר'ה, מי שרוצה, עכשיו, כמה שניות. זוזו. לא, אורלי, בבקשה. אורלי.
So even here, the reporters are asking him, why are you sabotaging the hostage release deal? So obviously, even people in Israel know that Bibi's purposely sabotaging it.
אין לנו רעיון, בבקשה.
לא רעיונות, אבל אולי הוא יסביר.
מה, זה לגיטימי? זה לגיטימי, הדבר הזה? באמת?
לא, צריכים לעשות דברים כאלה. לא, מר נתניהו צריך להסביר על
לא נגיד בעולם בית המשפט, לנהל פוליטיקה בעולם בית המשפט.
חבר'ה, תודה, ההרכב רוצה להיכנס. חבר'ה, בבקשה. חבר'ה, תודה. יאללה, אנחנו יושבים, כניסת שופטים. להוריד מצלמות בבקשה.
So obviously,
ההחלטה שהעברתי בקבינט פה אחד היא זאת.
Bibi definitely speaks English, but this isn't an English thing. Let me double check. This was 2 days ago, but it says the decision I passed unanimously in this cabinet is this: if Hamas
אם חמאס לא יחזיר את חטופינו עד
does not return our hostages by Saturday noon, the ceasefire will end and the Israeli Defense Forces, the IDF, will return to intense fighting.
שבת בצהריים, הפסקת האש תיפסק וצה"ל יחזור ללחימה עצימה עד
Until Hamas is finally defeated.
להכרעה סופית של החמאס. לאור הודעת החמאס
In the light of Hamas' announcement of its decision to violate the agreement and not release our hostages last night, or ordered the
על ההחלטה שלו להפר את ההסכם ולא לשחרר את החטופים שלנו, הנחיתי אמש את צה"ל לצבוע
the IDF to gather forces in Assad and around the Gaza Strip. This operation is being carried out at this time. It will be completed in
כוחות בתוך רצועת עזה ומסביב לרצועת עזה. הפעולה הזאת מתבצעת בשעות אלה, היא תושלם בזמן הקרוב
the
ביותר.
very near future. So obviously, this is kind of like essentially, in theory, kind of like martial law, where kind of would stay the president, give him this ultimate power to kind of, you know, beat down dissenters, and even in the event there was an election, they could he could remain in power. So this is pretty much what Netanyahu is wanting to do. They've never wanted to have a two-state solution. They've always wanted to literally take over Gaza for sure and the West Bank, and this is all done with the help of the United States. Literally, we've given them $300 billion and more. Obviously, we fought several wars for Bibi and Israel, which has accumulated $8 trillion. So this is obviously pissing off the America First crowd. So Sean Strickland is a UFC fighter, if anybody doesn't know. Pretty much a badass dude. America First. So I don't necessarily agree with everything he says in this post, just because I have a lot more understanding on what's kind of going on in the Middle East, AIPAC, all of our politicians on the Democratic side, Republican side, being bought and paid for. Joe Biden bought and paid for, Kamala Harris bought and paid for, Donald Trump bought and paid for. So it's just literally, we do have a Israel first policy with all the members in Congress. There's a handful that don't accept AIPAC money, but the reality is, we're controlled by Israel. So Sean Strickland said the other day, 2 days ago, American jobs, check. Deportation, check. Lower taxes, check. And then he says, invade, occupy, rebuild Gaza. Wait, what? Laugh out loud. So, free Palestine, to the river and the sea, whatever commie slogan they say. So it's really not a commie slogan. That's kind of where I disagree. It's just, the reality is, this is, this is genocide. This is ethnic cleansing. This is literally some Europeans coming in, stealing brown people's land, and just bombing women and children and innocent bros. So, but he goes on, the day before, man, if Trump keeps his BS up, I'm about to start waving a Palestinian flag. American cities are shitholes, and you want to go spend billions on this dumpster fire. Did we make a mistake? This isn't America First. So he kind of came back and said that. So just to give a little bit of an idea of what's really going on, Miriam Adelson and her husband has given Donald Trump over $300 million to his campaign. Obviously, Jared Kushner, very highly influenced by Bibi Netanyahu. He used to stay at his house. Jared Kushner had aspirations to rebuild Gaza. So just to kind of see if I can find it real quick. Obviously.
In Gaza's waterfront property, it could be very valuable. The thing that I would try to do if I was Israel right now is I would just bulldoze something in the Negev. I would try to move people in there.
Are people in Israel seriously talking about that possibility, about hosting Gazan refugees in what is considered, quote unquote, Israel proper?
I don't know.
Yeah, but that would be something you would try to work on.
I'm sitting in Miami Beach right now. I would say, how do we deal with the terror threat that is there so that it cannot be a threat to Israel or to Egypt, right? I think that both sides are spending a fortune on military. I think neither side really wants to have, a terrorist organization enclaved right between them. And Gaza's waterfront property, it could be.
Well, what Jared doesn't understand, Jordan and Egypt, they've already taken displaced Palestinians, and we're talking about 1 million and plus. So, it's the same kind of in theory that America has. We can't just accept, everybody and their mama coming to the country. It wears down our infrastructure, it wears down our hospitals, it wears down our welfare, it wears down, employment opportunities. So, I mean, the list goes on and on and on. And that's the reason why you're even having this um illegal migration debate even in America. So literally just plopping another 1 point something million, 2.2 million people in these other countries that are not economic powerhouses like America, they can't just absorb it. So even in America, where we're printing over $30 trillion in GDP every year, we can somewhat absorb um some, well, I'll probably say a large amount of immigrants. But when you have so many immigrants in flooding America, then it does become um an infrastructure issue. So, and it's not that Egypt doesn't want them. It's just that why would you take some people when those people have already settled agreements back in the 60s that they should be able to stay in their land that they have a claim to, and they've had that claim for several thousands of years and are actually truly indigenous to that land.
Very valuable to if people would focus on kind of building up, livelihoods. You think about all the money that's gone into this tunnel network and into all the munitions. If that would.
And so the thing about the tunnel network, those tunnels are already there when Israel had ownership of that land. So to sit here and act like Hamas just built these tunnels, or it's like, let's just say everybody from Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina just moves to New York. Well, those subway tunnels, those tunnels are already there. They've been there since the late 1800s, and obviously the infrastructure has expanded, but just to act like we didn't just move from the south to the north and those tunnels weren't already there. So, I mean, I'm not really big on fact checking, but especially when somebody's talking, but people have to correct this disinformation, this misinformation. And if he's at Harvard, when this is being said, then, somebody who's, I'm sure there's professors there who are educated on the Middle East.
Would have gone into education or innovation, what could have been done. And so I think that.
And you can't act like the occupation and the apartheid hasn't taken place for decades. So, I mean, he's just being truly disingenuous.
It's a little bit of an unfortunate situation there, but I think from Israel's perspective, I would do my best to move the people out and then clean it up.
So that is that. And it kind of lets you know who, and so obviously that's Donald Trump's son-in-law married to Ivanka. But yeah. So this is what happened last week, which I kind of find it odd. I mean, I don't know. I think that Donald Trump also, he's surrounded by Zionists. Obviously he's taking Zionist money. So, this is something that I completely disagree with because it's not America first. Um, but just to kind of give a backstory on what's kind of going on, Hamas's response. Obviously, Trump said that he wants all the hostages released. Hamas is kind of keeping up with the original ceasefire deal that they signed with Israel, which is some hostages at a time. And right now, the second phase of the negotiation deal should be taking place. At the same time, Israel should not be shooting people. Israel should be actually be pulling back the IDF forces and letting in more humanitarian aid, which they're not doing any of those things. So Hamas has confirmed that on Saturday they're going to release, well, you'll see,
captives held in Gaza as planned on Saturday. The group released a statement saying the talks with mediators continuing the deal were positive. A Hamas delegation has been holding talks in Cairo with Egyptian and Qatari officials. Well, the statement reads, the discussions during all the meetings and contacts focused on the need to adhere to the implementation of all the terms of the agreement, especially with regard to securing housing for our people and urgently bringing in prefabricated houses, caravans, tents, heavy equipment, medical supplies, fuel, and the continued flow of relief and everything stipulated in the agreement. The talks were characterised by a positive spirit, and the mediating brothers in Egypt and Qatar confirmed that they would follow up on all of this to remove obstacles and close gaps. Now, Hamas confirms its continued position to implement the agreement in accordance with what was signed, including the exchange of prisoners according to the specified timetable. Well, Israel has not confirmed whether it will continue implementing the ceasefire. Mobile homes needed for shelter.
So, I don't want to bore you with the whole thing, but obviously Saudi Arabia is a powerhouse. They're part of OPEC. They've been literally willing to accept American dollars since Richard Nixon days. And that's allowed us to kind of have this dominance. But Saudi Arabia also sees the tides turning during, they were willing to work with Donald Trump in the first term. Things definitely changed under Joe Biden. They got very close with BRICS. They got very close with Russia. Russia is also a powerhouse when you're talking about oil, OPEC. And so this could end up very bad if this war continues.
Shift things.
He's got a goal, a dream for Gaza that would mean turning it into a Riviera-style area, but the local people being moved out. Your reaction to that plan, possibly settled in Saudi Arabia, Mr. Ambassador?
Well, my government's position is we would welcome a Riviera in Gaza. I think that would be wonderful. But we're not going to do it by removing the Palestinian people. Certainly not moving to the Saudi. They don't want to move. You know, it's their land, it's their territory. They deserve all the best that we can provide for them there. And we'd welcome America's efforts to improve their situation on the ground.
So how do you see the redevelopment of Gaza taking place, Mr. Ambassador?
Well, I mean, first there's a lot to do before that. One, you have to clean up Gaza. Two, you have to provide some sort of peace mechanism. From our position, the only way that can be done is through a two-state solution. We have to create a Palestinian government that's recognized by everyone, including Israel. And then we can begin to work on building Gaza. You know, 75 years ago, many Palestinians left their homes and they lost them. I don't think they want to do it again.
Would temporary accommodation be provided for the people in Saudi? Would you ever see that happening?
That's a decision for the Palestinians. You know, we are happy to take people in. We are a welcoming country. If there's a situation that they want to come to Saudi, then they're welcome to come. But I don't think they want to leave. They want to keep hold of land that they've been threatened with losing. And I think that's most important.
You'll be aware of the days, if not hours, ticking down to this deadline on Saturday, 12 noon on Saturday. All hostages to be released, initially put forward by President Trump, supported overnight, I'm sure you're aware, by Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. How nervous should we be about that?
Well, when I first heard of the details of the hostage release plan, I was slightly incredulous because it was complicated, long drawn out, many phases. It was quite staged, which opens the door for a lot of negative players to try and spoil it. I'm thrilled that it's gotten as far as it has, but there still are a lot of negative players on both sides, and I think we have to watch with care. Intransigent positions can lead to the failure of good things, so hopefully it goes forward.
Now, I've read that talks could take place soon between President Trump and Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. Can you confirm when they're taking place, or is that as yet unknown?
It's being worked on, timings, etc. They are in contact quite regularly, both through diplomatic channels and phone calls. I can't speak if they have each other's WhatsApp number. That's also possible. But there will be conversations had. It's really important for us to get this over the line and to present not just the Saudi position, but the position of the region.
What is the Saudi position?
It's very simple. Two-state solutions based on the 1967 borders with East Jerusalem as a capital. At the end of the day, that's our perspective, but the important perspectives are that of the Palestinians and the Israelis. They need to both agree on what the right solution is. From where we sit, we don't see another option.
What do you understand to be the relationship between the two men?
The Crown Prince and the President?
And President Trump.
I think it's a healthy relationship. You know, people are often get hysterical about political developments. We forget that the President has already had one term. We know what happened. The world didn't end. In fact, many parts of the world were improved. We get along with any leader of our friends, but also of countries we don't get along with. We try very hard to engage. The relationship with the US is one that is a friendly relationship, not just an alliance. And we'll continue that regardless of who's in the Oval Office.
It's fair to say, I think, Ambassador, that many of my listeners are not familiar with Saudi. They won't have been through Saudi Arabia. They don't know much about it. How would you sell Saudi Arabia to someone who's never been there?
Well, it's...
So that is Saudi Arabia's response, but we also have to understand you're dealing with some smart guys. You're dealing with some methodical people, and they're businessmen, and obviously, their populations are Muslims, practicing Islamics. They have Mecca and some other very high profile Islamic buildings and things that people have to do on their pilgrimage. So just to honestly think that that's not going to be an issue with Israel wanting to take over Gaza, with them obviously wanting to take over the West Bank. Israel's position is not really being interested in a two-state solution. They really want what they consider the Jewish diaspora to leave their lands and to come back to this homeland. But the real problem is Israel antagonizes Middle Easterns. They provoke them, they terrorize them, and then it becomes a whole out issue. And from what you read in history, they just kind of throw a rock and hide their hand, or they cry, they cry wolf, or they poke the dog in the cage, they beat it, they mistreat it, and then when the dog decides to bite, they go about crying about it. So but this is kind of where I stand. I don't know if we're gonna watch the whole thing, but definitely on a lot of things I kind of do agree with Dave Smith on
that one. So we got to talk about the Trump Gaza proposal, which Look, I just start.
That's our rubble. Our bombs made it. We own it now. We demolished the area. We're going to rebuild it.
It really is, right? Israel breaks it, we buy it. I guess that is the lesson to be learned. If you break it, you buy it, but the you is Israel, and then the other you has to be us. Look, man, and like I say this as somebody who just said everything I've said on the show so far, and somebody who supported Trump in this election and is just, cautiously optimistic, but incredibly hopeful about what could actually be accomplished in this administration. I do not think this plan is going to happen. I think it is almost inconceivable that he could actually get Egypt and Jordan to take in the Palestinians from Gaza. But I to be clear here, this is about as awful a proposal as any president could make. And this is part of what's so horrible about it is that it has the potential to ruin all these other positives. Like if Donald Trump actually were to try to go through with something like this, this could really sink his administration. It could plunge America into another just catastrophic quagmire, and it could undo all of the good things he's done and all of the potential good things that he could do with this high approval rating and this new mandate.
And so Dave is absolutely right. When you look at 2001 to about 2004, George W. Bush had this mandate. The large, overwhelming majority believed that this horrific event happened on September 2001, and there needed to be retaliation. Then our allies started withdrawing, France being one of the first ones. Their engineers realized that it's inconceivable for airplanes to fly into buildings and for them to just fall straight down. More evidence starts coming out that Saddam didn't have weapons of mass destruction. And then it just literally became, we are fighting George W. Bush's daddy's war, George H. Bush. We're just a continuation of that. We're there for these poppy fields. We're there for this oil. We are there for Bibi Netanyahu. And by the time everything was said and done, we're trillions of dollars in debt. We were already trillions of dollars in debt on September 10th. Donald Rumsfeld had said that, the Pentagon was already missing trillions of dollars. And then, of course, the next day happened. More videos started coming out that, George W. Bush was reading a book up. There was just a lot that was just kind of coming out at the time. And as you know now, Iraq and didn't have anything to really do with it. So that was just a pointless war. And so by the time, and plus the economy had cratered, I think a lot of the markets and the housing thing started happening. And so literally by the time George W. Bush left, it ushered in a new wave of hope and change with Barack Obama, and George W. Bush became one of the most hated presidents until Joe Biden. And I do think that if Trump does get us into another war, it's not going to be good, for the simple fact that he ran on this anti-war, him being the anti-war candidate. Liz Cheney, Dick Cheney are these neocons. George W.H. Bush are these neocons. Condoleezza Rice, Colin Powell, all this other stuff. And so it could really, be detrimental. And I already think that Donald Trump already has economic factors that's already going to be leading to a recession, that we're kind of hidden under wraps under. Joe Biden's presidency. Obviously, Donald Trump and Joe Biden and Barack Obama all contributed to this. You don't just get to print trillions of dollars out of thin air and don't think that they don't have repercussions. Um, but yeah. So if the economy collapses, on top of ending up in another war, I think that Donald Trump could have even a worse presidency rating than um, even George H. Bush. So, especially considering he ran as the anti-war candidate.
And all the energy behind the Trump administration. So, man, I don't think this is actually going to happen. I think this is kind of a Trump first, whatever. It's like the way his mind works is that he's a real estate developer. So he goes, oceanfront property, money could be made off this. He's floating out an idea that I think he believes is going to put pressure on the other Arab nations. But even that is just terrible because that's not really who needs pressure put on them. Like the idea that you're pressuring any of these other countries, like, look, even someone said to me, when I was trashing this idea on Twitter, and someone said to me, "No, Dave, what he's really doing is putting pressure on Saudi Arabia to come to the table now and to negotiate in good faith." It's like, dude, go look at Saudi Arabia's proposed peace plan. It was totally reasonable already. They took the same. I mean, it's pretty easy to propose a peace plan in this region because the same plan has been on the table so many times before, which is what, 67 borders, like a two-state solution. Like, you guys have to stop occupying Palestine. Palestine has to stop suicide bombing people in Israel. Like, that is everybody knows what the solution is. But the idea that people are saying, which is what seems to me to be the most common defense of this insane proposal that Donald Trump floated out, which is like, gotta try something new, gotta shake it up. The status quo hasn't been working. It's like, okay, well, I agree with you on that. What exactly is the status quo? Oh yeah, the status quo is unconditionally supporting Israel in no matter what they want to do. Even if what they want to do is against what the president wants them to do, they'll still get their check in the mail. They'll still get their bombs in the mail. I don't think you send bombs by mail, but you get my point. That's been the status quo. So you want to shake things up and try something new? Okay, how about America not funding Israel anymore? That's something new. How about a Palestinian state? That would be something new. So don't just just to shake things up and try something new doesn't mean we will go ethnically cleanse the Palestinians out of Palestine for you, Israel, since that's been your goal all along. It's like, I don't know, like, I'm all for, I saw when Michael Knowles was defending it the other day, and he said that, he goes, well, the definition of insanity is trying the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. And it's like, yeah, okay, but that doesn't mean that the definition of sanity is you just suggest anything that's different than the same thing. Like, yes, if you have like a headache and you take Advil every single day and the headache won't go away, then yeah, take an Advil the next day and thinking the headache is going to go away maybe is a little bit insane to think the same thing is going to work this time when it hasn't worked. But that doesn't mean hitting yourself in the head with a hammer is a great proposal. You know what I mean? Like, just because it's different doesn't mean it's the right thing to do. And no, this would be, oh my God, first of all, the idea, it's so not based in reality. The idea that you're going to get Egypt and Jordan to take in the Palestine. By the way, one thing you might have noticed from the press conference, Rob, is that Trump said all of them, and he said either 1.6 or 1.7 million. Which, by the way, the latest numbers were that there were 2.3 million people in Gaza. And so I'm just saying, I don't know exactly where he got these numbers from, but I've always said from the very beginning of this that the people who were arguing over whether the Ministry of Health's numbers were accurate or inaccurate, that this was all a complete non-point, and that if you just look at what Israel's doing here and you look at the population density and you look at the number of bombs that they've dropped, that there are going to be hundreds of thousands of people who die as a result of this. And it's a lot of them die, which is what all.
And this is what I like about Dave. He's just gonna call it out. He's not this Republican shield that's just like, well, whatever the Republican Party says, whatever it is, I'm just gonna go with. And that's why I've really stood behind him and Candace Owens on this whole Palestinian issue. Yeah. And those numbers are correct. You start off with 2.3 million, then you're missing 800,000 people, give or take. Anywhere between 6 to 800,000 people are now dead. So,
always happens in war. A lot of them die from secondary effects. You know, like they don't necessarily die because a bomb dropped right on top of them and killed them. They might die because they couldn't get medical treatment because all the medical resources have been exhausted due to the war. You know what I mean? Like you blow up hospitals, people die for unrelated reasons. And so anyway, it's an interesting window into what the real numbers are there. But Donald Trump makes the point that, these other countries will take them, and then we can go in there and build up big. But look, here's the bottom line. How are you going to make them leave? I mean, they've stayed through all of this. They've stayed through decades and decades and decades of brutal occupation, of brutal blockades. How are you going to make them leave? And if the U.S. owns it, as Donald Trump said, we're taking it over, the assumption would be that we have to make them leave. So you're saying what? We're going to send the U.S. military in to now fight a war with Hamas? Something that Israel's been unable to eliminate Hamas by all intelligence reporting. So what, we're going to take that on now? And also, is there any thought at all to like understanding that this has been at the center of the Muslim world's beef with America? Like, this is the reason why we've had to deal with the Al-Qaeda problem, why we had to have this terrorism issue to begin with. Do you have any idea like how much that will increase if we were to actually go in and just transparently, nakedly finish the ethnic cleansing for Israel? It's a disastrous proposal. And I truly hope it ends soon. Like they're even entertaining this. I don't know if there's anything you want to add to this, Rob.
It seems particularly cruel. And for as much as I fought back on the sanctity of borders and Putin talk because of all the things we've been doing in the world, and there was, I think we provoked him and,
sure.
we're moving a military close to him. But the idea of Israel being able to bomb its neighbors out of the territory and then just keep it seems like it shouldn't be part of the world in 2025.
Yeah. Well, listen, here's let's play here. Donald Trump did elaborate more on this for some people who were arguing with me that he wasn't saying that Palestinians would get kicked out.
Some of the things he was saying in the Netanyahu conference also, where he goes, the Palestinian people have just been unlucky and no matter how long they're going to be here.
Yeah.
It's like he's just describing as if this was the result of an alien invasion.
But you're sitting next to the guy who did it.
Yeah.
You're sitting next to him and going, the place has been destroyed. It's unlivable. It's horrible that people have to live like that. And he's like, yeah, no, I agree. You totally should kick him out for us now.
Yeah.
And then, of course, Donald Trump, he speaks in kind of coded language, but at the same time, I know who this guy has always been, what his position on Israel has always been. I know the people that he has around him in his cabinet. And I know that Miriam Adelson, our Palestinian friend, gave him $100 million. Okay. So it's like, people are like, oh.
And that's just this election. That's not including, she's handpicked a lot of the people in his cabinet, including Marco Rubio. And when her husband was still alive, also gave another couple $100 million too. So, yeah.
Oh, he's not really saying this. He's saying this. It's like, it seems much more likely this is actually what he's saying. He said Gaza would be for the people of the region, but that the Palestinians would have to go.
Yeah.
So if it's not for the Palestinians, who are these people of the region that it's for? Sounds like Israelis would be the answer to that, okay? And here, a bunch of people were arguing with me on Twitter. No. He's just saying relocate them while we clean up all the mines and then they can go back in. Well, here is Donald Trump addressing that on his Super Bowl interview with Brett Baer.
We'll build beautiful communities for the 1.9 million people. We'll build beautiful communities, safe communities. Could be 5, 6, could be 2, but we'll build safe communities a little bit away from where they are, where all of this danger is. In the meantime, I would own this. Think of it as a real estate development for the future. It would be a beautiful piece of land.
Would the Palestinians have the right to return?
Spent. No, they wouldn't, because they're going to have much better housing, much better. In other words, I'm talking about building a permanent place for them, because if they have to return now, it'll be years before you could have it's not habitable. It will be years before it could happen. I'm talking about starting to build, and I think I could make a deal with Jordan. I think I could make a deal with Egypt. We give them billions and billions of dollars a year. We'll build beautiful communities.
just to be clear, this is what he's saying. We'll build them big, beautiful refugee camps, and they'll love them so much. They'll love the refugee camps in Egypt so much that they will, I don't know, whatever. And I got to tell you, I also do think, for people who argue with me about this and they're like, no, this is art of the deal stuff. Well, first of all, it doesn't make any sense. He's not putting pressure on the people you'd need to put pressure on to actually get to the right deal at the end of this. And number two, I do not think there's any practical way that this can be pulled off. He can sit here and say, oh, we give foreign aid to Egypt and Jordan. That is true. And people will point out, like, they'll go, oh, well, look, Dave, he was able to threaten tariffs on Mexico and Canada and get them to send 10,000 troops each, to the border. And so, look, he's going to get these concessions out of them. I understand when people feel that way. All you're really saying is that you don't understand the region at all, and you don't understand the history, and you don't understand the issues here. And it's fine. Not everybody has to. But it is such a wildly different ask to ask Egypt and Jordan to take in nearly 2 million people than it is to ask Mexico to send 10,000 troops to their border. That is not a regime-threatening request that you're asking of Mexico. Like, the Mexican government does not believe that they will fall if they put 10,000 troops on the border. But in Egypt, last time you had elections, the Muslim Brotherhood won. And then there was a military coup, and now there's a military dictatorship where they're holding that Muslim Brotherhood down. You think they're just going to take in a bunch of people from Hamas and change around those numbers? In Jordan, you have I don't know the exact percentage split right now, but it's close to 50% of the population is Palestinian. Okay? You think the Hashemites are going to bring in another 500,000 Palestinians to give a majority or like that much more of a majority to the it's like, these are very difficult questions to ask, but or very difficult things to actually achieve. But the idea that, look, but first of all, in theory, if the people of Gaza, if we got them, like if we gave them the option to relocate somewhere while Gaza is rebuilt and then they could move back in after, and they voluntarily wanted to do that, I'm not like necessarily opposed to that. Like if you got Egypt on board to be like, hey, we have these facilities, they can stay here until this thing is rebuilt and then they can move back, that's one thing. But if you're actually talking about, this is just blatant ethnic cleansing. If you're saying that we're just going to, against their will, we're going to force nearly 2 million people, whatever's left of that 2 million people, we're going to force them out and then make it something for Israelis to come and live in, that's just so wrong and so not our responsibility to do. It's just a disastrous proposal. Really hope that Donald Trump changes his mind on that one.
So we shall see. I mean, when you start talking about hundreds of millions of dollars, obviously, when you're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars, this shit can get tricky really quick. And when you're talking about House Republicans, House Democrats, Senate Republicans, Senate Democrats overwhelmingly supporting Israel, this shit can get really quick. This shit can get messy quick. So I think that yeah, we have to stop supporting Israel. We have to start building up, Western North Carolina, Eastern Tennessee. We have to start building up middle of America. When you're really on this road, you start going inland like into Florida, and I mean it's poverty. You start going into places like St. Louis, it's poverty. You start going into places like Memphis, it's poverty. You start going into Arkansas, you start going into Mississippi, you start going into Louisiana. So we really have to consider, an economic powerhouse revitalization here in America before we could just sit here and just support some folks that are not even indigenous to that land to go ethnically cleanse some people that are indigenous to that land, and then continue to provoke and provoke and provoke and other Islamic countries that are actually our powerhouses like Saudi Arabia. So tell me what you think, but like, share, subscribe. Y'all be good, y'all be safe. Peace.